Welcome, everybody, to this session of Appreciating jj-vcs. This is being presented today by Andrew Petro, who is a software developer in the School of Medicine and Public Health. Andrew, thank you for your time today. Take it away.
Glad to be here. So this is a bit of a flash talk. It should be relatively quick, and I'm going to tell you why I appreciate jj-vcs, jujitsu, I think it's called. Um, and yeah, that's where we're going. So we have just a few minutes here. Who would like to explain how Git works? That's a joke. Don't do that. Um, Git is really, really powerful and awesome, and there's much to appreciate about it. And it's also pretty complicated, right? Because when you start explaining to someone how Git works, then pretty soon you find yourself explaining that there's like this working copy that's the files on your disk, but then there's this index of like what part of those files are teed up to be part of a commit, but they're not committed yet. But then there's this tree of things that have been committed. So those are commits. And then there's these stashes, and those are sort of like commits, but they're not really commits, but they're like these diffs off to the side that you could apply. And oh my goodness, it is so powerful, but it is also so complicated in that there are all these different things. And wouldn't you know, the tools and the commands and the flags and the stuff is all a little bit different for all those things. Or it's the same, but then you got to pass it flags to tell it which one did you mean, right? You go to git reset to get back to a simple, starting point in your Git repo. Well, what did you mean? Did you mean git reset hard? Did you mean git reset soft? Did you mean git reset mixed? And what is going to be the effect of all those? And the reason there's all that complexity is because there are these different concepts and they're all important and you need to get them all right. What jj-vcs is is a version control system that's kind of a successor to Git. It takes lessons from Git, it takes lessons from Mercurial, it takes lessons from other things, and builds a new version control system. But uh, because they would like anyone at all to use their new version control system, it's backwards compatible with Git. So you can use it locally as a Git client, um, still share your code using Git, still do all the Git things, and yet start to benefit from different abstractions. So the most important thing I can tell you about Jiu-Jitsu VCS, JJ-VCS, is that there's always a commit and you're editing its contents. So instead of a model in Git where you've got like this working copy and this index and they're not really a commit yet until you make them a commit and then they're a commit, the concept in Jiu-Jitsu is that there's always a commit. You're always on a commit. It already exists. All you've got to do is edit it and make it have what you want. So, for example, um, maybe it would be a good idea to have an introduction to this talk, which I hope we just did, maybe. Um, and so I could have that goal. And so I could say, cannot think and type at the same time, but we're going to describe the commit. We're going to have a commit comment, a message on a commit that's like add introduction. Okay, so now where we're at right now is um, I'm here in the repository. It still has no contents in this change because I haven't done anything yet, but I have described the change that it's going to add an introduction, right? And then maybe I would like actually add an introduction, and let's check that off. Done. For good or ill, I introduced it. Okay. So now I've got that change to the README to add the introduction. Um, the prior commit was, some other notes I had. There's this commit. Um, we can see that in the log. And when I'm done with this commit, I don't commit it. It's already committed. It's continually committed. I decide to start a new commit. So I could do jj new, and now that previous commit about adding the introduction, that is now past history. It's the parent, change in this log, and I've now got a new empty commit for me to start um, making new changes, which feels weird coming from Git, but the huge advantage of that, the thing that pays dividends, is it meant not inventing different things, right? It meant not treating the active state of the file system, the working copy, as something different. It meant not having an index that is somehow different than the working copy in the file system. And it meant that it was already a commit, so all the tools that apply to commits already apply. That is the key difference in jujitsu. That turns out to pay a lot of dividends. Um, I could stop there because it would be true that that's the radical difference. The problem with that is you're almost certainly not yet sold because you don't know why to care about that difference yet. But that's the big difference. Okay, what else do we get for jujitsu? I've talked about the fewer primitives, so I guess I could take credit for that. Uh, Note fewer primitives. I don't know. Oh, right. Pretty good error messaging. Forgot to do the -m thing. Okay, cool. So I've described this commit that I've noted. I'm going to go ahead and take credit for that. Cool. Uh, okay, cool. For our next trick, um, let's go back and edit some history. So let's go back and go and let's edit that change R. And okay, so now I'm back here and I can realize, man, I get the name of my talk wrong. How silly is that? It's not, there we go. Let's fix that. I should probably do that in a different commit, but I'm not going to. So then I can go back to what we were maybe working on. So I could do maybe jj new, make a new commit off of um, the top of the tree again. Here's what I want you to notice. It went ahead and rebased those to bring that change all the way up to this latest commit. So I went down here, I made a change, I saved that by navigating away from it, and Jujitsu was like, great, I can rebase those other changes on that change. They don't conflict. Life is fine. It's all good. We're moving on. That is amazingly convenient when you're working locally to build a series of commits that do things as you realize that, oh, I got that one wrong. I got that one wrong. I can edit that. And so you can get a delightfully clean history relatively conveniently. And that's certainly not something you can't do in Git, but it is something the tooling is more natively helping you do here in Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, to get that to work, so we might notice we got these identifiers here. So that there is the traditional Git identifier. It's a hash and it uses, a subset of the characters for that, some numbers, some letters, your traditional Git hash. And that's hashing the message, that's hashing the files, the state of the system. A bunch of stuff goes in there. And of course it changed, right? Because the contents, the sum of the messages and the contents of the repository changed through that rebasing, right? And so that those Git commits have changed. The change identifiers, which is the new thing that Jujitsu introduces to make this possible, did not change, right? So that's the spot in the tree, that's the message, that's the identifier that's going to stay persistent even as I ridiculously jump around and edit things. And so you get a new identifier, you get an old identifier. You can do both. Uh, and so beyond Git, where the identifier is very much tied to the exact spelling of your message, the exact contents of the repo, if you change any of those things, you get a new hash. It's a different commit. Um, in Jiu-Jitsu, you get both. You get the commits, which are completely Git compatible. They're literally Git commits. And you've got these new changes that, and so if I want to think about or navigate to, that time I introduced the introduction, I've got an identifier for that. If I want to specifically think about the commit in which I did that, I've got an identifier for that. Okay, cool. So I talked about change IDs. That's good. I could maybe take credit for that. That was a useful exercise here. Um, what else can I talk about here? Okay, I should foot stomp the Git compatibility. So, uh, this is in fact compatible with Git. I can prove that by the previous main is way down here, and it is in fact synced up to git.doit, where we have the old state of that. Whoop, wrong. Over here. Okay, cool. So I can jj bookmark set main. Boom. Um, well, that's a little silly because this latest commit's empty. So maybe I'd rather set it to that previous commit, but fine. And then I can do jj git push. And it doesn't like it because I didn't describe it. Okay. JJ describe, please push. Boo. Something like that. Oh my goodness. Do not do live demos ever. JJ describe, please push. Okay, cool. Now will it push? There we go. Cool. And so we're in git.doit, and it pushed the branch. Life's great. Okay. So it's compatible with Git. You can still share your code. Your colleagues kind of can't tell that you're using it. They totally can't tell you're using it. You get more primitives in the sense of these change IDs, which turn out to be convenient. You get fewer primitives in the sense of you don't have to think about how stashes are different. You don't have to think about what's in the index, which is kind of invisible. It's also not using the working copy in the same way that Git is, which turns out to be really convenient. Okay, so let me emphasize that. JJ log. Okay, so another thing that's going on here is I have these made up changes back earlier in my history that I got into a conflicted state. And so a conflict arises when, there's different changes, um, that conflict with one another. And so you need to resolve those conflicts. In Git, when you rebase or when you encounter a conflict, you kind of have to deal with it right away. Like there's no such thing as I'm going to rebase but not address that and defer that to later. And the reason for that is because it's literally using your file system. It's using the working copy to work through those changes. And in jj-vcs, it's not. It's doing that in memory. It's doing that in the data structures. And the key advantage of that is you can defer dealing with those merge conflicts. So you can become aware that a branch is conflicted. You can go ahead and rebase it and tell the system that, no, I do want it to be off of this other point in the history. Those conflicts are not yet resolved. That's totally fine. It will remember that they're not resolved. It will even let you keep working off that commit, off that branch. I can um, make a commit off of any of those. And I only need to resolve those conflicts when I'm ready to resolve them. And so I can kind of batch that work to when my brain is in that state. I can defer that and find out it never needs to be done because some other change in the code base. Um, that turns out to be pretty convenient. Okay. Um, rev sets. Rev sets are a way to search the revision history with functions and expressions. It's pretty cool. It lets me, um, jump to a commit by its commit message or by, a rule about who made it on what date or any number of clever things. Um, and that's power I didn't have in Git that I don't often need, but when I need it, it is very helpful. The point of this flash talk was to whet your appetite for jj-vcs is a thing. It's available. It um, is compatible with Git. It's got some features that Git doesn't have. It's got some simplicity that Git doesn't have. It makes authoring a sensible sequence of logical commits, atomic commits, self-consistent commits to get to a set of changes to share with others. Um, I think a lot more powerful without more complexity, with really less complexity because I don't have to think about how the index is different than anything else. Um, everything's just a commit. Was that enough to even enable questions?
Anybody does have questions, feel free to put your hand up or put something in chat. Oh, we have one in chat.
There
Is there?
are good training materials for using jj-vcs. And so uh, jj-vcs. So it's got, a GitHub repo, it's got a web page. Um, we're not in Teams, we're in Zoom. And uh, there are a couple good tutorials about it that are pretty prominently linked in the documentation. Getting started. Um, so there's a tutorial, but then there's the official tutorial. There's also a tutorial by Steve Klabnik, which is really good for someone coming from Git. And there's a tutorial about jj-vcs that doesn't require Git experience, this jujitsu for everyone. Um, they're both useful. So this is definitely the one to start with yet, if you have not yet paid the cost of learning Git, uh, then you kind of don't ever have to, and you can just do that, and yet it's Git compatible. Or if you're coming from Git and trying to understand how it's different and how your assumptions about Git are going to trip you up, then Steve Klabnik's got a very uh, so one answer to what is the state of plugins is I don't know because I haven't looked again quite recently. But another answer to what is the state of the plugins is bad. Um, that is a that is the current downside of using jj-vcs is that you're totally fine if you're using it directly on the command line. It's a perfectly serviceable Git client directly. But if you're using other tooling that assumes it's integrating with Git and that insists on doing Git stuff, um, that works surprisingly well because it is Git compatible, but you are not getting any benefit through those UIs because it doesn't know that it's using jj-vcs. It will, um, yeah.
All right. Not seeing any other questions come in. I will remind you that you can find Andrew's contact information on the IT ProConf webpage if you want to send follow-up questions later on down the line. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today and presenting. Attendees, thank you for spending your time with us. The next session will start up at 1 o'clock.
Thank you so much.